Greetings to all. Students, in today's session, we are going to discuss a very important topic, and that is role of legislature, executive and judiciary. Today's discussion can be divided into following heads: introduction, meaning of government, legislature and its role, executive and its role, judiciary and its role, and conclusion. The state is an essential political organization of the society which is supreme over all other organizations in its sphere. The government is one of the four main elements with the help of which the state is formed. The state takes the help of the government to achieve its goals through governance. In ancient times, all the powers of the government were exercised by an individual or a group of persons. But at present, the scope of government has become very wide. At present, there are three main organs of government: legislature, executive and judiciary. These three organs have an important role in the operation of the government. Students, have you ever thought that in long course of time, how the mankind has transformed itself into a civilized society? The civilized society which can not only provide safety to its citizens, but provides all necessary facilities to grow and get development. Yes, the answer is state. State is such an miraculous thing which has come into existence. State is the most beautiful and moral expression of civilized life. When we move further, yes, the state come into reality through the government, because whatever is thought by the state for the welfare of its citizens or by providing the facilities to its citizens, it is provided through the instrument called the government. If we move further, we see that in ancient times the government has very limited functions. But in modern times, due to the concept of welfare state, due to the growing aspirations of the citizens, the functions performed by government has become very large. That is why it is necessary to categorize the functions of the government, and in that connection there are three organs or three branches of the government. They are legislature, executive and judiciary. And all of these organs play very important role in smooth governance. Meaning of government. In fact, the state is a broad concept. The state is a politically organized society. The state is the first necessity of a civilized life, on whose proper management depends the happiness and progress of the people of a country. According to modern scholars, the state is such a community of the majority of persons which has four essential elements: population, territory, government and sovereignty. Student, we see that state is a concept, it is an idea, and if we see the various definitions of various scholars, we come to a conclusion that there are four main elements of a state, that are population. Yes, there is a group of persons permanently occupying a territory. That is why the second element is territory, and third element is government. Yes, through government these people who are occupying a fixed territory share all the laws which are made to regulate their life, habits and customs. And fourth element is sovereignty. Sovereignty means a group of people can take its own decisions. They are not under any pressure from outside, and they can decide what they want and execute their desires. So, we can say that a state has four main elements, and the government is the most important element of a state. In modern times, the functions of the government are divided into three classes: making laws, implementing laws and doing justice. For these three functions, there are three parts of the government: the legislature, the executive and the judiciary. This institutional division of the structure of government is based on the principle of separation of powers. According to this theory, the separation of powers can lead to the emergence of a system of control of powers and protection of individual liberty. According to this principle, the three main functions of the government should be performed by its three different branches, and the scope of these three different branches should be limited in such a way that they remain independent and supreme in their field. Students, as we talked, nowadays the functions of government has increased immensely. So, there is a need to categorize them, and we can categorize them in like making the law. Then comes the implementing of law, because there is no sense of making law until they are not implemented properly and their benefits do not reach the citizens. So, as making law is important, the implementation of the law is also important, and when there dispute comes, then comes the justice. So, all these three types of functions are performed by three different branches, which are namely legislature, executive and judiciary. And do you know, this separation of power is based on a concept which is also known as separation of power, which says that if all three powers or all three functions are centralized in one person or group of persons, they are certain to be misused, and which can harm the interest of the citizens. Their life will be in danger. So, it is said that these three functions should be categorized, they should balance each other, they should be independent in their own field, and they should be supreme in taking decisions regarding to that functions. The legislature. Legislature is that important part of the government which formulates laws and policies for whole nation and prepares base for executive and judiciary to perform their functions. Legislature is also called the mirror of the public opinion. In comparison to other two organs of the government, its work and responsibilities are greater. The importance of legislature in a country depends on the type of government prevailing in that country. The legislature represents the public, therefore, in a democracy, the supreme power remains with the legislature in principle. Students, when we talk about the legislature, this is the most important part of the government, because to regulate the society, to maintain the order in the society, laws are necessary, and these laws are made by the legislature. The legislature is called the mirror of public opinion, because we know that legislature is formed from the representatives which are elected by people in democracy. That is why what people think, what they want they desire is converted in the form of laws. That is why the legislature is the most important part, and it prepares ground for executive and judiciary to perform their functions. Functions and role of legislature. In democratic countries, the legislature is the main institution to fulfill the aspirations of the people of the country. Although there is a lot of differences of opinion regarding the role of legislature in modern democratic societies, states, yet its role can be discussed under the following heads. First, legislative functions. The most important function of the legislature is to make laws. Representatives elected by public opinion are responsible for law making according to people's emotions, hopes and expectations. It is also the responsibility of the legislature to amend or to make new laws in place of old laws. Bills are proposed in the legislature only, and they are approved after following a certain procedure. Students, the most important function of legislature is to make laws. Yes, in every country, according to aspirations of the citizens, desires of the citizens and necessary conditions of that society, laws are proposed by the executive, but importantly they are discussed and passed by legislature only. When these laws are put in the houses of the legislature, there takes long debates on them, corrections are made, some provisions are added, some are objected and removed, and at final they get the assent of legislature. As time passed, some laws get obsolete, so they have to be removed. This function is also performed by legislature, which amend the constitution, which amend the laws and make them useful for the citizens in that conditions. Second, control over executive. The legislature controls the executive. In countries with parliamentary rule, the executive is completely dependent on the legislature. The executive is also created from the legislature, and that is why it is responsible to the legislature. In presidential form of government, the executive is not responsible to legislature, but the legislature has control over the executive through various measures. Students, another important function of legislature is to control the executive. There are two types of governance form in democracy, and that are, first is parliamentary form of governance. In this system, the government is made out of legislature, because to become a member of the government or executive, a person has to be member of either any house of the legislature, and it is responsible to the legislature also. If we talk about the presidential form of the government, though the executive is not responsible to the legislature, but there are other measures through which the legislature can control the executive. For example, in America, through the impeachment motion, the legislature can remove the president from its post if he is found guilty. Third, financial functions. The legislature controls and regulates the national economy. Through the national budget, the legislature exercises control over the financial activities of the executive. The legislature has full control over the expenditure incurred by the executive. To exercise the financial control over executive, the legislature constitutes some parliamentary committees. Students, financial functions are also very important for any nation, and legislature holds full control in financial matters also in democratic nations. Legislature give assent and pass the national budget. Budget is although prepared by the finance ministry or finance minister, but all the provisions of it are discussed, properly debated in the legislature, and then it gets passed. So, through budget, legislature hold control over executive. Not only this, in after that coming time, parliamentary forms some committees to audit, to investigate in all the matters related to finance and take necessary action. Fourth, judicial functions. Although the responsibility of judicial work is on the courts, but in some countries the upper house of the legislature also does judicial work. For example, in England, the House of Lords is the final court of appeal. Similarly, the parliament in India can remove the president through the process of impeachment. Even in America, the upper house of Congress hears the case related to the president through impeachment and removes the president from office if found guilty. Students, parliament or legislature performs some judicial work also. As we have given the example, in England, the upper house, which is House of Lords, is the final court where a convicted person can appeal for mercy. In the similar manner, in India, the president can be removed from his post by the impeachment motion, and this all process goes into the parliament. In America also, the president can be removed through impeachment motions. So, these are the judicial functions which are initiated in the parliament. Fifth, electoral functions. In all countries, the legislature does the work related to the election. Like in India, the parliament participates along with state assemblies in the election of the president. Apart from this, the legislature improves the electoral system by enacting laws related to elections. Student, legislature takes important part in electoral functions also. And the other method through which the election process is affected is the amendment in election process. If government wants to amend any electoral process, then it has to get it passed through legislature. Sixth, amendment in the constitution. In modern democratic systems, the most important right of the legislature has been considered to amend the constitution. The legislature represents the public, so keeping the right to amend the constitution with the legislature is natural and essential. The process of amendment is different in different countries. Student, constitution has to be amended time to time, so it can become relevant according to situations. Generally, in all the countries, this right is given to the legislature, where the amendment is discussed, debated, and discussed its necessity, and then it is passed. It is natural also, because in legislature there are representatives of the people. So, it is very logical to give this right to the legislature. All these functions are traditional functions of legislature. In the present changing circumstances, the legislature has also started performing some modern functions, such as the act of providing legitimacy. Students, through the legislature, the government gets legitimacy. The act of providing representation, yes, the representative of the people, as a mirror of public opinion. What the people of country think is represented in the legislature. Manifestation of public grievances. Yes, public grievances are raised in legislature and discussed and resolved. Political socialization and educational functions. Students, when people participate in political processes and they become the part of legislature, their political socialization takes place. Supervision, investigation and monitoring. Legislature holds investigation, it monitors and it supervises the activities of the executive and warns it as and when required. The executive is another very important constituent of the government. Executive is that organ of the government which is concerned with the execution of the will of the state, as that will has been formulated and expressed in terms of law. It is the axis around which the real administrative system of states revolves. Today, the word government is used for executive, though it is the organ of the government. There are different types of executive which prevail in different countries. Students, another element of government is the executive. When the laws are made, they are passed, then comes the part of implementing them, and here becomes the responsibility of executive. That is why executive is called, or it has become the synonym to the government, because it has gained more importance and it has become more powerful than other two organs of the government. So, executive is also very important part of the government. Functions and role of executive. Generally, in any democratic country, the functions of the executive are: first, administrative functions. The first and foremost function of the executive is to handle the administration of the country. The executive performs many administrative functions to maintain peace and order in the country and to implement the laws made by the legislature. Formulation of national policy for internal and external purposes is the function of the executive. Students, for a civilized society, maintenance of law and order is an utmost functions, and this is formed by the executive. It has to appoint many persons, it takes many actions, it makes policies related to internal and external matters which can establish smooth order in the society. Second, financial functions. Passing the national budget and keeping control over the economic system, etc., are the functions of the legislature, but the initiative and guidance in this regard is taken by the executive only. It is the executive that makes and implements various programs related to economic planning and public welfare. The recommendations to impose new taxes or abolish taxes on the public is made by the executive only. It is the duty of the executive to see whether the provisions of the budget are being fully implemented after they have been passed by the parliament. Student, financial functions of executive are also important. as we have studied, budget is passed by legislature theoretically, but if you go deep, you will find that the proposal of budget is made by the finance ministry, which is part of executive. Not only this, but whether a passed budget has been implemented according to provisions or not, it is also the responsibility of executive. So, national economy and development of country rest with the responsibilities of the executive. Third, legal functions. Generally, it is the responsibility of the legislature to make laws, but in practice under delegation, the executive only prepares the draft of the law. Apart from this, in the event of non-functioning of the session of the parliament, the president has the right to issue ordinances. Any bill passed by the legislature takes the form of a law only when it is signed by the president. Students, in the process of delegations, partially some responsibilities are handed over to other person. Same thing happens in legislature. Due to the lack of expertise, the legislature hands over some of its responsibilities of making law to the executive. So, what is happening? Laws are being passed by legislature in theoretically, but practically they are being made by the executive. In the another situation, we see that when the session of parliament is not on, then the president, who is head of executive, can pass ordinance which get approval later. In the same manner, any law which has been passed by legislature takes the form of law only when the head of executive, the president, signs it. Fourth, judicial functions. The head of the state can commute the sentence given by the highest court of the land. He may also grant amnesty to the offenders or reduce their sentence by his discretionary authority. In modern times, where administrative tribunals are made, the executive completes its quasi-judicial functions. Student, in most of the countries, the executive head of nation is granted with the discretionary power to grant amnesty to the offenders, though this power is exercised by the executive looking around all the situations and its impacts. In the same manner, in modern times, some administrative tribunals are formed, where the problems of the employees or aggrieved persons are discussed at administrative level. In this manner, we can say that the executive has started doing quasi-judicial functions. Fifth, political functions. The executive heads the political system of the country. Under this, after deliberations, it takes decisions and implements them and tries to get public support for these decisions. The executive only does the work of tying the political system of the country into unity, peace and order. It constantly monitors and controls the governance and administration of the country. Students, executive is responsible for binding the whole country political in the thread of unity, peace and order. Executive in terms leads the country politically and which is seen by other countries. So, this is most important functions of executive to perform some political activities. Sixth, maintenance of diplomatic and external relations. Establishing relations with foreign nation is also an important responsibility of the executive. Under this, establishing relations with other countries, exchanging ambassadors, making treaties or agreements with foreign countries, deciding war, etc. are done. There is a post of foreign minister in every nation to conduct foreign relations. Student, every nation has to maintain foreign relations. In these foreign relations, more activities are done like exchanging ambassadors to each other, making treaties, and all these are done by the foreign minister. This is part of executive. Seventh, military functions. Almost in all countries, the constitutional head of the executive is the supreme authority of military power of the state. He is the supreme commander in chief of armed forces. He holds the power to declare the war or peace. In the emergency of war, the powers of the executive increase a lot. Students, in almost all the countries, executive head becomes the commander in chief of all their army forces. Generally, the war declaration and declaration of peace is also made by the executive head. We know that in the time of emergency which arises due to a war, the powers of executive increase a lot. The judiciary. Judiciary is an important part of the government in any democratic system of governance. The main principle of democracy, liberty and equality are protected by the judiciary. In this way, the role of judiciary is very important in the protecting democracy. The judiciary is that most important organ of the government which provides an interpretation of laws and punishes those violating the laws of the land. It is authorized to solve all the disputes of citizens according to law of land and establish discipline in the social life of people. Student, discipline in social life is very necessary, and this function is performed by the judiciary. Judiciary follows the law of land and it resolves all the disputes which arise among citizens. In other words, it protects the democracy. It provides all that safeguards to the democracy which are necessary for it. Functions and role of judiciary. The powers or the role of the judiciary may be discussed as under following heads. First, interpretation of laws. The complicated language generates disputes regarding meaning of that law. In such conditions, the judiciary provides the proper interpretation of law and resolves the dispute arising due to it. The judiciary broadens the scope of law by giving clear interpretation of laws. Students, though the efforts are made, but sometimes the language of laws become so complicated that it gives rise to disputes. In these conditions, the proper interpretation of law is made by the judiciary and the confusions are removed. Second, protection of citizens' rights. In democratic countries, the constitution provides the fundamental rights to the citizens. These rights may be interpreted by other citizens or by the state even. In such situations, the afflicted party reaches to the judiciary. The judiciary considers his petition and provides justice and thus protects the citizens' rights. Students, protection of citizens' rights as fundamental rights is also the responsibility of judiciary. When these rights are disrupted or disturbed by maybe citizens or even by the state, then judiciary intervenes. The aggrieved person reaches to the judiciary. Judiciary, after hearing, provides proper justice to the aggrieved persons. Third, role as the guardian of the constitution. The judiciary acts as the guardian of that constitution. If any law passed by the legislature or functions performed by the executive is found to be against the provisions of the constitution, then judiciary declares that law or function unconstitutional and protects the constitution. This is called the power of judicial review. Student, judicial review is very important power of judiciary, through which it can review any law passed by legislature or functions performed by executive, and if they are found to be against the provisions of constitution, it can declare them invalid, and by this the judiciary becomes the guardian of the constitution. Fourth, advisory functions. When the chief executive of a nation finds himself confused on any constitutional or legal matter of public importance, then he can seek advices from the judiciary. In India, such advice of Supreme Court is not a binding on the President. Student, there may be a situation when the head of executive may find himself confused regarding any law or functions of the government. In such situation, he can get the advice from judiciary. So, this is also an important responsibility of judiciary. Fifth, settlement of disputes. The judiciary hears all those cases which arise due to differences in opinion or interest, like cases related to property, money or violence, etc. After due considerations based on law of land, it provides decisions and puts an end to those disputes. Students, this is the very common function and responsibility of judiciary to resolve all the disputes among citizens which arise due to various reasons. Sixth, making decisions on the basis of natural law. Sometimes the judiciary faces such disputes which cannot be resolved on the basis of existing law. In such situations, the court have to take decisions on the basis of natural law. Such decisions becomes a directive example in that particular situation and taken as law. Students, when some situation arise, when there is nothing regarding that in constitution or law, then natural law has to be implemented, and this decision is taken by judiciary. Seventh, administrative functions. The judiciary is empowered to recruit its employees and set the procedures of its working. The executive does not interfere in the procedure of working of judiciary to ensure its independence. Students, as we know, judiciary has to be impartial and independent. For this purpose, executive does not interfere in the process of recruitment of judicial persons and make it independent. Eighth, other functions. The judiciary has to perform many other functions. The judiciary inquires into complicated cases which require thorough investigation, gives final settlement to the property ownership issues, appoints receiver or administrator to take over the property, appoints guardians in the case of minor, grants licenses, authenticate the will of a person, resolves matters related to elections, validates civil marriage, etc. Students, all these functions are important in a citizen's life. Though the judiciary's main function is to protect the constitution and resolve the disputes, but as all these functions are important, judiciary also performs its important role in resolving or settlement of these issues. Conclusion: the state is the first necessity of a civilized life, and the state is the only supreme authority within the society. But the state cannot be imagined in the absence of the government, because the government is the embodiment of the state. The functions of the government are categorized into three categories, which are performed by three organs named as legislature, executive and judiciary. Roles of all these three parts are important in smooth functioning of governance system. Student, as conclusion, we can analyze that for the happiness and prosperity of the society, state is necessary, but to give a realistic form to the state, government is necessary. And to categorize the functions of the government, three branches are made. We have seen the roles of all these three branches, and we can say that all three branches are important for the happy and prosper life of citizens. Thank you.